If you reach into your wallet or look inside a safe deposit box, you'll find a small blue and white slip of paper. It isn't made of plastic like a credit card, and it doesn't have a microchip. It's just cardstock and ink. But for nearly a century, that Social Security card has been the most sacred document in the American economy. When it was first introduced, Social Security wasn't described as a government benefit. It was described as an insurance contribution. It was the third leg of the stool, the foundation that, alongside your personal savings and your company pension, ensured you would never face poverty in your old age. For the generation that came of age in the 1950s and 60s, the rules of this insurance policy were simple and unbreakable. You paid in your FICA taxes, and in return, the government made a promise. At age 65, you would receive a check. That check was yours. It was not a handout. It was the return of your own hard-earned money. And most importantly, that check was never, ever taxed. The idea of the government taking a cut of your Social Security was unthinkable. You had already paid taxes on that money when you earned it. Taxing the benefit would be double taxation, a violation of the basic trust between the citizen and the state. Back then, the Social Security Trust Fund was often described as a lockbox. It was a segregated pool of wealth, growing steadily as the American workforce expanded. It was the fixed anchor of the American retirement. But as we stand here today, looking at the headlines of impending insolvency and stealth taxes, we have to ask, where did the lockbox go? When did the sacred promise turn into a government slush fund? To find the answer, we have to perform a deep archaeological dig into the year 1983, the year the rules were rewritten in the dark. In the early 1980s, the American public was told there was a crisis. They were told that Social Security was running out of money, that the Great Depression-era math no longer worked for the modern world. To solve this, President Ronald Reagan and Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill formed what became known as the Greenspan Commission, led by a future Federal Reserve Chairman, Alan Greenspan. Their mission was to save Social Security. But in the world of economic archaeology, saving an institution often means harvesting it. The 1983 Social Security amendments were a turning point that most Americans didn't fully grasp at the time. This was the year the lockbox was officially pried open. First, the Commission decided that the retirement age, the sacred number 65, was no longer sustainable. They began a creeping increase that would eventually push the full retirement age to 67. It was a subtle way of telling the American worker, we need 2 more years of your life before we honor our promise. But the real heist was much more sophisticated. For the first time in history, the government introduced a tax on Social Security benefits. They started small. They said only the wealthy would pay. They set income thresholds, $25,000 for individuals and $32,000 for couples. If your combined income exceeded those amounts, up to 50% of your benefits could be taxed. Here is the archaeological secret. Those thresholds were never indexed for inflation. The Commission knew that as time went on, inflation would naturally push more and more middle-class retirees over those limits. What was originally sold as a tax on the rich has become a tax on everyone. Today, a modest pension and a small IRA withdrawal are enough to trigger a tax on the very benefits you spent 40 years paying for. This was the birth of the double tax trap. The government had found a way to take back the money they had already promised to give. But where was that tax money actually going? To understand the secret of the trust fund, we have to look at what is actually inside that lockbox. Most Americans imagine a vault filled with cash or gold, or perhaps a diversified portfolio of American industry.
But the reality is far different. When you pay your FICA taxes today, that money doesn't sit in a vault. It is immediately spent by the government to pay current retirees. If there is any money left over, a surplus, the government takes that cash and spends it on the general budget. They use it for roads, for wars, for interest on the national debt. In exchange, they place a special issue treasury bond into the trust fund. In other words, the Social Security Trust Fund is filled with IOUs. This shift happened because of a clever accounting trick called the unified budget. By including the Social Security surplus in the general budget, the government could make the national deficit look smaller than it actually was. They were using the retirement savings of the American worker to mask the overspending of the political class. The lockbox wasn't a vault, it was a filing cabinet filled with debt. As economic archaeologists, we can see the impact of this move. By turning Social Security into a debt-based system, the government made the sacred promise dependent on the taxpayer of the future. They traded a self-funding insurance plan for a pay-as-you-go system that relies on the government's ability to borrow more money. This is why the 50-plus demographic feels a sense of unease. They intuitively understand that a promise backed by a debt is only as good as the person holding the pen. The 1983 raid didn't just take the money, it took the independence of Social Security and chained it to the volatile world of Washington politics.
Now we must look at the modern squeeze. How do these 1983 rules affect your life in 2026? The most dangerous part of the Social Security secret is what financial planners call the tax torpedo. Because of those unindexed 1983 thresholds, many retirees find themselves in a bizarre situation where earning an extra dollar of income actually costs them more in a dollar in taxes and lost benefits. As you withdraw money from your 401k or IRA to supplement your lifestyle, you inadvertently trigger a higher tax rate on your Social Security. You are being penalized for the very personal responsibility the government told you to embrace. But it goes deeper. In 1993, the rules were changed again, allowing the government to tax up to 85% of your benefits. We are now living in an era where Social Security is treated as secondary income rather than a primary right. Furthermore, we must look at the IRMA squeeze, the income-related monthly adjustment amount. If your income exceeds certain levels, your Medicare premiums skyrocket. This is another stealth tax on the 50-plus demographic. The golden age of a simple, untaxed retirement is gone. It has been replaced by a maze of phase-outs, clawbacks, and surcharges. The system is designed to means test you through the back door. They don't want to tell you they are cutting your benefits, so they simply tax them until the net result is the same. This is the 2026 squeeze. We are seeing a generation of retirees who did everything right. They saved, they invested, they paid their taxes, only to find that the third leg of the stool is being slowly sawed off by the very people who promised to protect it. So, as we stand among the ruins of the 1983 lockbox, what is our golden insight? How do we protect our future in a system that has changed the rules in the middle of the game? First, we must master the art of income sequencing. In the 2026 economy, how you take your money is more important than how much you have. You must work to keep your provisional income below the 1983 thresholds whenever possible. This might mean using Roth conversions earlier in retirement or utilizing tax-free income sources like municipal bonds or cash value life insurance. Don't let the tax torpedo sink your retirement ship. Second, we must adopt a private Social Security mindset. We can no longer treat the government check as our fixed anchor. We must build our own lockbox. This means focusing on assets that the government cannot easily tax or claw back. Dividend-paying stocks, physical assets, and private income streams. Your goal is to make the government check a bonus, not a necessity. Third, we must demand transparency. The 1983 raid happened because it was buried in a 1,000-page bill. As a demographic, the 50-plus U.S. citizens have the greatest voting power in history. It is time to demand that the lockbox be restored, not with more IOUs, but with real, segregated assets that belong to the people, not the politicians. The sacred promise of Social Security was born in an era of sounder logic and greater trust. We cannot go back to 1935, and we cannot undo the 1983 pivot overnight, but we can refuse to be victims of the stealth tax. By understanding the economic archaeology of your benefits, you regain the power. You stop being a beneficiary waiting for a handout and start being an informed citizen protecting a legacy. Social Security was meant to be the floor of the American dream. Don't let them turn it into a trap. Use this golden age insight to build your own floor, your own security, and your own future. Before we go, I want to ask you, when you look at your Social Security statement, do you feel a sense of security or a sense of concern? And do you think it's fair to tax the benefits you already paid for? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about the sacred promise and how we can protect it together. Thank you for watching the Golden Age Insight.